Tonight's headlines: the march toward war. Iraq repositions its forces. Saddam tells CBS News he will not seek asylum. President Bush tells the nation why Saddam must go. Also tonight, engineers, it turns out, warned of an impending shuttle disaster less than a day before it happened. And they blew the whistle on security violations at the Los Alamos nuclear weapons lab. Now they're blowing it again.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. A new war with Iraq appears more likely than ever tonight, and sooner rather than later. The United States today dismissed a Canadian plan to give Saddam Hussein a March 28th deadline, saying it is, quote, only procrastination. And as more U.S. forces deployed near his borders, Saddam finally began openly maneuvering some of his forces to new positions. Iraqi police set up defensive fortifications at key sites in western Baghdad today, and CBS's David Martin reports some of Saddam's best army units are on the move.
In the face of an American buildup which has now reached 210,000, Iraq has begun the first major repositioning of its forces in preparation for war. A Republican Guard division in northern Iraq has begun moving south, probably to Saddam Hussein's hometown of Tikrit, possibly all the way to Baghdad. Saddam is still trying to avoid war by making concessions to the weapons inspectors, but in case that fails, he is pulling his elite troops back toward his center of power. A former U.S. Army general who fought the Republican Guards in the first Gulf War says they are elite in name only.
I would not describe them as elite by any performance that I saw on the battlefield.
Ron Griffiths commanded troops who destroyed an entire Republican Guards division, and he predicts the Iraqis will put up even less of a fight this time.
They're poorly led, they're poorly motivated, and I think their loyalty to any of the authority in Iraq is very tenuous.
The U.S. is still hoping to win this war without firing a shot, and is actually calling senior Iraqis on the phone and warning them they will be tried as war criminals if they follow Saddam's orders. Soon, U.S. officials say they will begin offering amnesty to Iraqi leaders who desert Saddam. For his part, Saddam is bringing in anti-war activists to serve as human shields and placing more and more military equipment near religious and civilian targets, like these tank transporters next to a mosque. Tactics which complicate American battle plans, but do not change the balance of power, which grows more and more lopsided with each passing day. Today, a 5th carrier battle group came within range of Iraq. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
If the United States unleashes that awesome power on Iraq, what might Saddam Hussein do, and what, if anything, might he be willing to do to head it off? I put those questions directly to the Iraqi president about 72 hours ago in CBS's exclusive one-on-one interview in Baghdad. If there is an invasion, will you set fire to the oil fields? Will you blow the dams for your reservoirs of water to resist the invasion?
These assumptions, I've answered them. As for the details, no one destroys his own wealth. And he does not destroy his dams. And I hope that this question is not an insinuation so that the Iraqi dams are destroyed during the invasion. Iraq does not destroy its own property or oil. The country protects these and uses them for its livelihood.
Mr. President, have you been offered asylum anywhere, and would you, under any circumstances, consider going into exile to save your people death and destruction?
I understand that what motivates Mr. Rather is something to provoke me. And this is an American style of journalism that doesn't please everybody. But it's okay. Despite that, I will answer it. I was born in Iraq, part of a great nation, and I lived in Iraq, and God has honored me through the Iraqis to be in this position, in this situation. Thus, I will die also in Iraq or in the nation as decided by God Almighty.
Saddam Hussein had a lot more to say, and you can see and hear it on a special edition of 60 Minutes 2, tonight at 9, 8 Central Time. In the interview, Saddam indicated he will defy a UN order to destroy his Al-Samud 2 missiles. The UN has given him till Saturday. Joining me now is a former UN weapons inspector, now a CBS News analyst, Tim McCarthy. Tim, this is the kind of rocket engine that would propel the Al-Samud missiles, correct?
Correct.
Now, what can you tell us about this thing?
Well, this is an engine built by the Soviet Union in the 1950s, originally for an air defense missile. The Iraqis have taken this basic engine, modified it a bit for use in this Al-Samud, and now this Al-Samud 2 flies further than the allowed ranges, and they must be destroyed.
Now, the Iraqis have, what, 383 of these engines? How difficult would it be to destroy them?
It's going to be difficult for the inspectors to destroy. This is actually a very rugged engine made of steel, and you're either going to have to run over it, for example, with a bulldozer, or attach some explosives up here to the pumping and the pipes to really blow it up, basically.
And if these engines are not destroyed, what happens?
Well, I have a concern that Iraq can take a Scud missile, put this on top of a Scud, and that new system will be able to carry a very heavy payload to about 400 miles, and that's a nuclear payload to Tehran or even to Tel Aviv.
Hey, McCarthy, thanks. President Bush has said many times that disarming Saddam is so important the United States is prepared to go it alone on the battlefield. But he is still seeking support from the international community and from the American people. CBS's John Roberts reports the president is making what the White House today began describing as a major address on Iraq.
President Bush will make another pitch to sell war against Saddam tonight, arguing that a democratic Iraq will serve as a dramatic and inspiring example of freedom to other nations of the region. He will also say any future the Iraqi people choose for themselves will be better than the nightmare world that Saddam Hussein has chosen for them. It's still a tough sell at the United Nations. France, a key holdout at the Security Council, today said war would be precipitous, illegitimate. But Security Council nations like Mexico, wary of how a no vote could affect their relations with the United States, appear to be softening their position. President Bush, who hasn't even uttered the word Mexico in public since he was there for a conference last October, showed his appreciation this morning.
This nation is committed to making sure we've got great relations with Mexico.
With Mexico on board, the Security Council split would narrow to 10-5. The U.S., which is actively courting swing votes like Angola and Cameroon, would need only 4 more yeas and no veto to pass a new measure greenlighting war against Saddam. A new CBS News poll out tonight shows President Bush still has a lot of convincing to do here at home. Americans are still split over the need for war at all. And if it comes, in even greater numbers say they want President Bush to wait for UN approval.
Tonight's speech is one of several President Bush will give in the next couple of weeks, preparing Americans for the possibility of war, building momentum for a vote at the United Nations, ultimately leading to a possible address from the Oval Office to say, time is up. Dan?
John Roberts reporting live from the White House. CBS News is making the president's speech available to all of our CBS stations beginning tonight about 7:20 Eastern Time, 6:20 in the Central Time Zone. And what happens after the war? In Kurdish-controlled northern Iraq today, exiled Iraqi opposition leaders began talks on how to run the country once Saddam Hussein is gone. A U.S. envoy told them the U.S. will help, quote, build a future democratic Iraq. CBS's Wyatt Andrews reports it is a future that would begin with an American general in charge.
The day the war ends and there's no more Saddam, you might be amazed at what the U.S. plans. The plan is for the full military occupation of Iraq, lasting years until Iraq becomes a democracy. The U.S. hasn't planned to govern foreign soil like this since the days of Douglas MacArthur.
This is going to look a lot like MacArthur in Japan.
Lauren Thompson is one of a handful of analysts who's been briefed on the occupation plan. After victory, the U.S. will anoint a military commander of Iraq, either wartime General Tommy Franks or some sources believe his deputy, Army Lieutenant General John Abizaid, who is fluent in Arabic.
There's going to be a U.S. military commander in Iraq after hostilities cease for two reasons. They don't want the weapons of mass destruction to get away, and they don't want anybody to get ideas about making grabs for power.
The plan is to rebuild what was destroyed, then to purge Iraq of Saddam's Ba'ath Party leadership, just like Germany was denazified, then to turn over the government, oil ministry included, back to the Iraqis.
The goal that the United States has is to put Iraqis in charge of their own affairs as quickly as possible.
Douglas Feith, the Undersecretary of Defense, has outlined plans for the new government. Iraq will be pushed into building a representative democracy. Iraqis will write the next constitution, but they'll use an American outline.
It would be a government that would build democratic institutions so that there are checks and balances, an independent judiciary, so people can have fair justice.
Congressional leaders have said they like the vision of this plan, but they are wary because there's no price tag. Despite estimates that range into the tens of billions of dollars, the administration says it can't even guess at the true cost, and so not one penny is in the budget. But no question, President Bush has moved the goal from regime change to democracy Iraq. The same president who promised not to nation build now plans the most ambitious foreign restructuring since World War II. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Washington.
As U.S. officials plan for the rebuilding of Iraq, the U.S.-backed leader of Afghanistan appealed today for more help in rebuilding his country. Visiting Capitol Hill, Afghan President Ahmed Karzai told lawmakers it would be, quote, very unwise for the U.S. to forget its promises to help Afghanistan even during a war against Iraq. In yet another dangerous trouble spot today, North Korea restarted a nuclear reactor, mothballed since 1994. One senior U.S. official called it, quote, another step in the wrong direction for North Korea. The North Koreans have not yet restarted their plutonium reprocessing plant, which would speed production of nuclear weapons. Coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, Mission Control was a lot more worried about a shuttle disaster than NASA let on. Some startling and prophetic emails next. There are new and serious questions tonight about just how early fears surfaced among NASA engineers that Shuttle Columbia was facing disaster on re-entry. And CBS's Bob Orr reports now there are questions about what the engineers did and did not do about their worries before the tragedy.
The day before Shuttle Columbia broke up in the skies over Texas, there was clearly concern inside Mission Control. New emails just released by NASA show controllers and engineers discuss nightmare scenarios that included the potential loss of the shuttle. If there is a serious breach in the wheel well, wrote controller Jeff Kling, there must also be a concern with the wing structure. The concern was over this incident that happened just after launch. 3 pieces of foam insulation struck the bottom side of the left wing. 3 separate analyses by Boeing experts concluded the debris strikes would not endanger Columbia or the crew. But some at NASA speculated if enough tiles had been damaged, heat inside the wheel well and wing could make a normal landing impossible and force the astronauts to attempt a highly risky parachute bailout from the shuttle. In that case, Kling wrote, it's going to be set up for a bailout, assuming the wing doesn't burn off before we can get the crew out. Engineer William Anderson responded with a question. Why are we talking about this on the day before landing and not the day after launch? But Anderson went on. If the wing is off or has a big hole in it, you're not going to make the runway. You won't have to worry about whether to deploy the gear or ditch, etc. Bailout is your only option. Probably won't even be able to do that. Another engineer, Kevin McClooney, raised the possibility of a belly landing, but then concluded that's almost certainly a loss of crew and vehicle case.
The shuttle broke up long before flight controllers could even consider a bailout. In the end, the emails were academic. Columbia was doomed. But top NASA officials never saw the emails until after the accident, now raising more questions about whether the space agency was really on top of a looming disaster. Dan?
Bob Orr reporting live from Washington. There was a big victory in the U.S. Supreme Court today for opponents of abortion and a woman's right to choose. The justices ruled 8-1 that federal racketeering and extortion laws were used incorrectly to try to stop harassment and violent protests outside abortion clinics. This decision lifts a nationwide ban on protests that interfere with abortion clinic business. Still ahead now on the CBS Evening News, a U.S. nuclear weapons lab whistleblower.
That's right.
Well, several of them blow the whistle again. You'll be interested to hear what they found now. CBS News has long investigated accusations of security lapses and fraud at this country's top nuclear weapons research facility, the Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico. Tonight, new allegations of fraud and cover-up in this investigation follow-up by CBS's Cheryl Atkinson.
As Los Alamos struggles to rescue its reputation as steward of America's nuclear weapons, two whistleblowers who first spoke to CBS News testified before Congress today. Glenn Walp and Steve Doran were employed as lab investigators when they uncovered stunning security violations and millions of dollars in theft and fraud. They say lab managers wanted it all covered up and fired them when they refused. Now they're questioning the lab's promise to make wholesale changes.
No prosecutions.
None. No prosecutions.
No arrests.
No arrests.
No indictments.
No indictments.
Not even the employee whom the lab gave $1 million a month credit line and got caught charging a custom Mustang at taxpayer expense.
As far as we know, she's still on the payroll and has not yet been terminated.
And investigators need to go back the last decade and dig into her records and other people's.
But they say no one at the lab seems interested in doing that. There's been no move to prosecute two other workers allegedly caught red-handed with spy gear, keys to secret lab locations, and who bought tens of thousands of dollars in personal fishing and camping gear at taxpayer expense. And internal documents show that as recently as last month, questionable buys by lab employees continued, from places like a pharmacy and bookstores. One employee even ordered ballet music CDs. Taxpayers footed an extra charge for two-day rush delivery. Though several federal probes are underway, Doran and Walp have yet to be interviewed by any law enforcement officials, making them question just how thorough the investigations can be. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
On the CBS Weather Watch, it's the third winter storm in a week to hit the south-central United States. Today's blast of snow, ice, and sleet stretched all the way from Texas to the northeast. There have been hundreds of traffic accidents and at least 11 storm-related deaths in Texas and Arkansas alone. Arson is suspected in a deadly fire that raced through a Hartford, Connecticut nursing home overnight. Rescue teams scrambled to save the 150 patients inside, many confined to beds and wheelchairs. At least 10 people were killed and more than 20 injured. Police say there is a nursing home patient they want to question in connection with the fire. Today was a national holiday in Kuwait, Liberation Day, marking the day in 1981 when a U.S.-led coalition routed the Iraqi army to end a 6-month occupation. So with thousands of U.S. troops again in their country poised for a new war with Iraq, CBS's Jim Axelrod reports Kuwaitis held a street party.
They waved two flags in Kuwait today. For Kuwaitis celebrating 12 years of liberation from Iraq, it was pure joy. But for Americans at this Marine camp, today produced a drastically different reminder. Gas, gas, gas. 3 words that can freeze a desert.
There's something tripped the indicator. They told everybody to mask up. It's not a drill.
It turned out to be a false alarm, but no one knew it at the time. Not the Marines scurrying across camp, not those in their armored vehicles, nor the troops donning their masks in the PX. Suddenly, it was eerily quiet. A quiet broken elsewhere in the desert by the most powerful reminder of the risks troops face. Four helmets, 4 rifles, 4 empty pairs of boots. They belong to 4 soldiers killed when an army chopper went down early Tuesday morning during training. Investigators are still trying to figure out exactly what happened, but a quick-moving sandstorm may have blinded and disoriented the pilots. It's the kind of weather U.S. troops could see again and again during a war with Iraq. March is notorious for sandstorms.
We're in a very dangerous business, and that
that's brought home every day we crank these aircraft and go fly or whatever we do.
Today in Kuwait was a day to celebrate the past, to mourn the present, and prepare for the future. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, Kuwait.
And that's part of our world. But don't go far. There's a lot more ahead tonight from CBS News. On 60 Minutes, too, our interview with Saddam Hussein, which includes his direct challenge to President Bush.
Then on 48 Hours Investigates, Robert Chambers was called a preppy killer. He did 15 years for Jennifer Levin's death. Now he's out. We have his first television interview.
48 Hours Investigates right after 60 Minutes, too. The Saddam Hussein interview begins it tonight at 9, 8 Central. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting from New York. I'll see you again soon with Saddam Hussein on 60 Minutes, too.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com. AOL keyword CBS News. The Saddam Interview. More of Dan Rather's exclusive one-on-one tomorrow. Experience CBS News.